June 21st, 1943. Truck Lagoon, Caroline Islands. The afternoon heat sits heavy on the water, turning the anchorage into a mirror broken only by the slow churn of patrol craft. Inside a low concrete signals building near the shore, ceiling fans push warm air in circles that do nothing to dry sweat from necks and wrists. A young petty officer in headphones stiffens as if he has been struck. The sound in his ears is not a voice, not even Morse. It is the absence after a transmission. The clean cut that means someone, somewhere, has finished speaking. He writes down the time and the call signs. He does it carefully, the way men do when they are afraid the paper itself might accuse them later. A lieutenant in the communications section takes the slip and walks it down a corridor that smells of ink, salt, and cigarette smoke. On the wall, the chart of sea lanes is peppered with red pins and thin strings. Too many strings terminate in the same places. Too many pins mark ships that never arrived. Rear Admiral Sadatoshi Tomioka, a planner with a combined fleet staff, stands over the chart with a pencil in his hand. Nearby, a naval captain from the convoy section clears his throat, but cannot quite bring himself to speak. The room is quiet except for the fans and the distant clank of a tool on metal from the anchorage. The captain finally forces the words out. Another convoy. Again, Tomioka does not look up at first. He traces a route from the inland sea south toward the Philippines, then to the oil ports farther beyond. The line he draws is neat, controlled, almost beautiful. Then he taps a spot in the Bashi Channel, where the line seems to pass through a choke point like a knife edge. Here, he says. Again, they meet us here. The captain nods. He has numbers. He has lost reports. He has survivors who describe the same terror, the same moment when a freighter shudders. Cargo cranes twist and seawater comes roaring through a wound in the hull. He has the usual explanation offered by men who do not want to admit ignorance. American submarines are getting better. Their torpedoes are improving. Their commanders are bold. But boldness does not explain timing. In the corridor outside, a staff officer from operations arrives with a folder tucked under his arm, face tight with fatigue. He bows, then speaks in a low voice meant for senior ears. The convoy departed on the revised schedule. Only the convoy commander and this office knew the change. Tomioka finally looks up. His eyes are bloodshot, the whites tinged with yellow from sleepless weeks. And yet the Americans were waiting. No one answers. The lieutenant with the slip of paper feels his mouth go dry. He keeps his gaze on the floor because everyone knows what comes next. The enemy is not simply reading the sea. The enemy is reading them. That evening, farther inland, the commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, Admiral Minaichi Koga, receives the daily summaries. Koga is not a man given to shouting. His anger is colder, expressed in clipped questions, and the long silence after an answer fails to satisfy. He sits at a desk under a shaded lamp, uniform immaculate, hands folded as if in prayer. Around him, officers stand at attention, each one hoping the blame will pass to someone else like a disease. Koga flips through the reports. 2 tankers damaged, 1 transport missing, escorts low on fuel, depth charges expended, no confirmed kill. In the margins, a staff officer has noted the submarine sightings along the convoy route, not scattered, but patterned, as if plotted by a careful hand. Koga sets the paper down. Our schedules are not secrets, he says, voice level. A captain from communications swallows. He speaks cautiously, choosing words like stepping stones. We have improved the codes twice this year. Sir, new call sign books, new procedures. But merchant captains continue to use routine phrasing. Some signals are sent in plain language for speed. Koga's gaze turns sharp. For speed, he repeats. Speed. The captain feels the edge of the word like a blade. Men nod, because it is dangerous to disagree, and because the truth is worse. The convoy war is starving the empire. Oil must move. Ammunition must move. Rice must move. To move anything, they talk. To talk, they transmit. And every transmission is a footprint in wet sand. Koga leans forward. When a convoy turns, he says, does it turn because of weather, or because a submarine is already in its path? The room tightens. The officers understand what he is asking. Not whether the Americans have submarines. Everyone knows that. The question is whether the Americans know, in advance, where the convoy will be and when. In the same week, on another island office thick with cigarette haze, a convoy staff officer lays out interception logs, signal timings, and the dates of sinkings. He draws columns, he circles repeats, he marks the moments when a convoy changed course and still, somehow, was met. It feels like fighting a ghost that arrives before you. One older officer mutters to another, too quietly for anyone to admit hearing. It is as if they are seated at our table. The sentence hangs there, poisonous. No one challenges it, because by mid-1943 the evidence has taken shape. Not proof in a courtroom sense, not a captured cipher machine or a confession, but the accumulated weight of patterns. Convoys struck in the same narrow waters, escorts arriving too late, detours that do not save them, radio discipline that frays under stress, and above all, a sense that the Americans are not guessing. They are listening. A map of the Western Pacific covers the far wall, and beneath it, a long table is scattered with folders stamped "Secret." The men seated there have the look of officers who have been forced to accept that the ocean is no longer wide enough to hide in. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome, sharp-featured and deliberate, reads the summary of shipping losses without blinking. His finger pauses on the same recurring note. Submarine contact at choke points, Bashi Channel. Luzon Strait, off Mindanao. The places where ships must pass as surely as blood through a vein. Across from him, a staff captain speaks in the careful rhythm of someone presenting numbers that can ruin careers. Our convoys have been intercepted with increasing precision, not only along the main routes, but also after last-minute changes. We have reviewed the escort commander's reports. They report submarines already positioned ahead of the convoys. Fukudome lowers the paper. Already positioned, he repeats softly. A junior officer shifts in his chair. You can see the thought behind his eyes, the same thought in all of them. American submarines cannot be everywhere, yet they appear in the right places too often. Fukudome taps the report. This suggests one of two things. Either the enemy has extraordinary reconnaissance, or our communications are compromised. The room is silent. Rain ticks at the windows like distant machine gun fire. An older admiral, his hair gone silver at the temples, exhales smoke. Extraordinary reconnaissance, he says. They do not have enough aircraft to watch every convoy. Not at these distances. Not through the weather. He leans forward, voice tightening. So which is it? The communications captain clears his throat and brings up a second folder. Inside are charts of transmission times, call signs, and frequencies. In a corner of the page, someone has scribbled a note in pencil, careless, angry. Too much talk. The captain speaks. Our encryption is strong when followed. The issue is procedure. Merchant captains, escort commanders, and port authorities have developed habits. They confirm departure times. They ask for fuel. They request route adjustments. They make routine reports in language that can be read even without codes. They use the same formats because it is faster. Fukudome looks around the table. Faster, he says. Again that word. Someone mutters, almost involuntarily. Speed kills. A few heads turn. No one challenges it. It is too close to truth. In the hallway outside, a telephone rings. The sound makes the younger men flinch. A messenger enters with a bow, hands a note to the senior admiral. Fukudome reads it and his face hardens. Another transport torpedoed south of Formosa. Survivor reports suggest a submarine fired from an ideal position. The escort believes the submarine was waiting. Waiting. That word spreads through the room like spilled ink. Fukudome sets the note down carefully, as if it is fragile. "Gentlemen," he says, "the enemy is not simply hunting, he is receiving." The older admiral narrows his eyes. "Receiving what?" Fukudome holds the silence for a moment, then answers with the restraint of a man who knows he is stepping onto thin ice. "Receiving our intentions." The phrase lands like a weight. It is not an accusation yet, not spoken as certainty, but it is close enough that every man present feels the implication against his own section, his own habits, his own earlier dismissals. A younger staff officer, eager and frightened, tries to push back. "Our codes were changed recently. Surely they cannot break them so quickly." Fukudome turns his gaze to him. Breaking is not the only way. If you cannot open a door, you listen at the wall. If you cannot read the cipher, you exploit the plain language. If you cannot understand the words, you still learn the timing and the direction. A convoy must declare itself to move, even if only by routine. He looks back to the map. The enemy does not need all our messages. He needs enough. The older admiral grinds his cigarette into an ashtray. "Then we must speak less." A faint, bitter laugh escapes someone at the end of the table. It is the kind of sound a man makes when he realizes that what must be done is also what will not be done. Another officer answers, voice low. "If we speak less, convoys depart late. Cargo piles up. Fuel does not reach the fleet. The army complains. The cabinet complains. Everyone complains." Fukudome nods once. "And if we speak as we have been, the ships do not arrive at all." The room holds that sentence in silence. For the next hour, they argue in the way Japanese naval men argue when lives depend on details. New call signs, shorter transmissions, strict penalties for plain language, separation of convoy schedules so no one person holds the full plan. A proposal to move departure, notices from radio to courier when possible. Though the distances mock the idea, they talk about weather reports, about rendezvous points, about escort doctrine. Each measure is reasonable. Each measure is heavy with friction. Then the older admiral says the thing no one has wanted to say out loud. "If the Americans know our shipping schedules," he says, "then they are not learning it from the sea. They are learning it from us." Fukudome meets his eyes. "Yes," he says, "from us." Outside, the rain keeps tapping, steady and indifferent. And in the darkness beneath the Pacific, steel cylinders glide on electric motors, patient as sharks. You can almost hear the echo of that meeting down there, translated into courses and speeds, into plotted intercept points, into torpedo angles. They speak in Tokyo. The submarines wait in the straits, inside an operations room above the waterfront. A large chart table is crowded with officers. Every surface is paper. Convoy rosters, escort assignments, sailing orders, weather projections. It is the sort of room where men think the ocean can be managed by pencils and stamps. Rear Admiral Shintaro Hashimoto, assigned to escort planning in the area, studies a list of ships scheduled to depart within the next 48 hours. He is not a man who wastes words. He has the blunt face of someone who has watched too many men drown and is tired of pretending the sea is fair. A lieutenant brings him a fresh signal log. Still warm from the printer, Hashimoto reads it once, then again. Slower. "The convoy has already been attacked," he says, without looking up. The staff officer beside him answers quickly, as if speed might soften the blow. "Yes, sir. Off the western coast of Luzon. 2 freighters hit. The escort reports the submarines approached from the exact direction that would cut the convoy off from shallow water." Hashimoto lifts his gaze to the chart. His finger traces the convoy route, then stops at a point on the shelf edge where the sea drops away and submarines like to lurk. He looks at the officers around him. "How many times," he asks, "have we lost ships at that bend?" No one answers with a number. The number is too large and too shameful. Hashimoto exhales through his nose. "Do you know what this means?" he says. "It means they knew where we would be. Not by chance. Not by patrol line luck. They knew." A captain from communications stiffens. "Sir, we have been reminding all convoy commanders to maintain radio discipline." Hashimoto turns on him, not with anger, but with a kind of weary contempt. "Reminding," he repeats, as if this is a schoolboy matter. He taps the signal log with 2 fingers. "Look at the times. Look at the pattern. The enemy attacks after we transmit, even when we believe the content is secure, and when we do not transmit. They still appear at the choke points." He leans closer over the table. "If they cannot read our words, then they read our habits." The room absorbs the sentence. It is February 1944 now. Months have passed since those earlier meetings in Tokyo and Truk. The losses have not slowed. They have accelerated. There is less oil, less steel, less time. Every convoy seems to sail under a curse. Another officer, younger, voice thin with frustration, blurts out what he has been holding in his throat. "How can they know our schedules in advance?" Hashimoto does not answer immediately. He looks toward the open window where the harbor lies beneath the gray sky. A transport ship is casting off. You can hear the chains rattle. You can see the nervous movements of sailors on deck, glancing toward the sea as if expecting torpedoes in the harbor itself. Hashimoto speaks quietly. "Because we tell them." The words are simple, brutal. Several officers look down at their papers. The communications captain opens his mouth, then closes it. No defense comes. In Tokyo, that same month, in a different room with cleaner air and heavier curtains, Vice Admiral Fukudome listens as a convoy staff officer lays out a case that has become impossible to ignore. The officer points to a series of sinkings and overlays them with known convoy departure dates and planned courses. "Even when routes change," he says, "the enemy appears at the new interception points." Fukudome asks one question, voice calm. "Who knew the new routes?" The staff officer hesitates, then answers, "The Port Authority, the convoy commander, escort command, and this office." Fukudome nods. "Too many." He stands and walks to the map. The pins are so numerous now they resemble a rash spreading across the sea. He places his palm on the table edge, steadying himself. "Gentlemen," he says, "we must accept that the enemy has access to our movements, whether by code compromise, traffic analysis, direction finding, or procedural weakness. The result is the same. American submarines are not only hunting, they are being directed." A senior admiral in the room, stern and suspicious, asks the question that has lurked like a shadow behind every conversation. "Are you saying our codes are broken?" Fukudome pauses. He chooses his words carefully, because words in such rooms are weapons. "I am saying," he replies, "that the enemy often knows our shipping schedules in advance." The sentence is a turning point. It is the moment when an admiral admits, in official air, what had previously been confined to muttered comments in hallways. There is no longer any shelter in denial. Another officer, from the intelligence section, adds a detail in a tone that suggests shame. "We have captured enemy documents from submarines and analyzed their patrol patterns. Their boats are being concentrated where our convoys must pass. This suggests prior knowledge, not random search." Fukudome looks at the man. "And how do they obtain that prior knowledge?" The intelligence officer does not have a satisfying answer. He offers theories, each one inadequate. Reconnaissance aircraft, coast watchers, spies. But the timing, the precision, the way submarines appear after departure messages and course changes, All of it points back to the same culprit: radio. In Manila, Hashimoto convenes convoy commanders in a cramped briefing room. The men smell of sweat and ship fuel. Their faces are hollowed by lack of sleep. They listen as Hashimoto stands before them and points to a chalkboard where he has written a list of rules in thick strokes. No unnecessary transmissions, no plain language, no routine confirmations, no chatter. He does not dress it up. He does not pretend it is merely a recommendation. Every time you speak, he says, you announce your convoy to the enemy. A convoy commander, older, his eyes red from exhaustion, raises a hand. Sir, if we do not report, higher command will not know our status. If we are delayed, if we require fuel, if the escorts lose contact, we must communicate. Hashimoto nods once, acknowledging the reality. Then communicate like you are whispering in a room full of thieves. He steps closer, lowering his voice, forcing them to lean in. You must assume, he says, that the enemy is listening. You must assume he is charting your words, your timing, your habits, and you must assume that when you leave port, somewhere out there, an American submarine already knows the day you sail. Men shift uncomfortably. This is no longer theory. It is doctrine born of loss. That night, as the convoy slips out into the dark, the escort's searchlights cut pale cones across the water, revealing nothing but ripples. On the convoy flagship, the radio room is quiet. The operator sits with his hands near the key, but does not touch it. Sweat beads on his upper lip. He stares at the silent equipment as if it might betray him on its own. In the deep offshore, an American boat runs at periscope depth, its captain staring through optics that slice the horizon into a thin line. He does not need to guess where the convoy will be. He has a schedule. A signals officer stands at attention, holding a folder of incident reports. His hands are steady, but his eyes are not. He has spent months compiling the same story, told in different voices. Escorts complaining that submarines arrive at the exact moment a convoy leaves a harbor. Port authorities insisting they transmitted only essential notices. Convoy commanders swearing they never used plain language. Yet their logs show routine messages sent in haste. At the head of the table sits Admiral Suemu Toyoda, recently elevated to command the combined fleet. He listens without moving, a face carved into patience. Around him are staff officers who look older than their years. The signals officer begins. Since January, convoy interceptions have increased along routes between the Philippines, Formosa, and the home islands, in multiple cases. Convoys attacked within 24 hours of departure, often at predictable choke points. However, several attacks occurred after course changes transmitted using secure circuits. Toyoda's eyes narrow slightly. Secure circuits, he repeats. Yes, sir. Encrypted. Toyoda's voice stays calm. Then we must consider two possibilities. Either the enemy reads our encryptions, or the enemy does not need to. The staff captain leans forward. Sir, there is another matter. Some convoy schedules are shared broadly. Port commands, merchant companies, army transport offices. Many hands. Toyoda looks down at the table. His fingers rest on the edge of a chart. Many hands, he says. Many mouths. He looks up at the signals officer. When the enemy learns a convoy will sail on the 20th, is it because he has broken our cipher, or because someone, somewhere, has transmitted the time in plain words out of habit? The signals officer hesitates. He has the answer in his folder, but the answer is ugly. In several cases, sir, departure notices were acknowledged by multiple stations. Confirmations were sent. Some were in abbreviated plain language. Others used old procedure books. Toyoda closes his eyes for a moment. Not from fatigue, from irritation. Old procedure books, he repeats. A younger officer speaks quickly, eager to show he is useful. Sir, we have ordered new call sign books distributed. But some outlying stations are slow to adopt. Merchant captains often keep old lists. Toyota opens his eyes again and the room feels colder. Then the enemy does not need to crack a safe. He only needs to find the key left under the mat. No one breathes. The phrase lands with the sting of an insult, but no one can dispute it. Outside the ship, on the warm Palau air, planes drone faintly in the distance. War is everywhere now. The American advance presses closer. Every freighter, every tanker, every barge matters. And yet the sea lanes are being cut like ropes. Toyota takes a pencil and begins to write on a clean sheet. From this day, he says, convoy schedule information will be compartmentalized. No station will possess the full plan unless absolutely necessary. Radio transmissions will be minimized. Routine acknowledgements are forbidden. Any port or merchant office violating procedure will be disciplined. A staff officer swallows. Sir, merchant companies may protest. Toyota does not look up. Let them protest with their pens, he says. If they protest with their radios, they will sink with their ships. The room accepts the order, but the men also know something Toyota does not say. Orders are paper. Habit is iron, and iron takes time to bend. In Manila, a convoy operations officer receives the new directives and reads them with a kind of hollow amusement. He has heard these rules before, in other forms, issued by other admirals. He folds the paper and looks at the radio room through a doorway. The operator is a boy, barely 20, eyes bright, hands restless. He has been trained to communicate, to confirm, to report. Silence feels like failure to him. The officer walks over and puts a hand on the radio desk. Listen, he says, voice low. If you must transmit, you do it like you are speaking through a cracked door. Short, tight. No routine talk. The operator nods, but his eyes flick to the clock, then to the message pad. He's thinking about the convoy commander, who will demand updates. He's thinking about escorts that may lose contact in rain squalls. He's thinking about the instinct to call for help the moment something goes wrong. The officer leaves the room knowing instinct will win more often than orders. Far north, near the waters off Kyushu, a different kind of meeting takes place. In a naval district headquarters, an admiral responsible for home waters defense listens to complaints from shipping officials. They speak of chaos, of convoys delayed because clearances take too long, of port authorities afraid to transmit even when a ship is late, of escorts waiting on information that no longer comes. The admiral's patience snaps. You complain about delay, he says, and yet you do not complain about the ships that never arrive. Do you understand what is happening out there? The Americans are not merely roaming. They appear where we send our convoys. They are guided. He jabs a finger at a chart, guided by what we say. The shipping officials exchange uneasy looks. One of them, emboldened by desperation, argues, Admiral, we have always used radio. We cannot run an empire by silence. The Admiral leans forward, voice hard. Then we will lose the empire by radio. The words hang in the stale office air. For a moment, even the clerks stop scratching at their papers. That summer, more convoys sail under the new restrictions. Some survive because the sea is wide and luck still exists. Others are struck anyway, because the enemy does not need perfect information to kill you. A departure time plus a likely route, plus a choke point is enough. In escort logs, the phrase keeps appearing. Submarine contact soon after convoy transmitted. Soon after. And in the minds of Japanese admirals, a new kind of certainty begins to harden. It is no longer only suspicion. It is a grim acceptance that the enemy's submarine campaign is being sharpened by knowledge flowing through the air. By August, an intelligence officer stands before Toyota with another stack of reports. And this time, he does not soften the wording. Sir, he says, the enemy seems to know our shipping schedules in advance. Even when we limit transmissions, their patrol lines are positioned with uncanny accuracy. Toyota's jaw tightens. Uncanny, he repeats. He looks around at his staff, eyes lingering on the communications men. Gentlemen, he says, if the enemy knows our schedules, then the fault is not the sea. It is our system. A staff captain answers, voice strained. Then we must change the system. Sir, Toyota nods once. Slow. Yes, he says. Before there is nothing left to protect. Outside, in the deep water beyond the reefs, the sea remains calm. A periscope breaks the surface for a few seconds, then disappears, leaving only a small ripple that spreads and vanishes. The convoy war is becoming a war of whispers, and Japan is losing because it cannot stop talking. On the wall, a board shows tonnage figures. Another shows routes in chalk, erased and rewritten so many times the surface is scarred. The numbers are grim. Tankers down, transports down, escorts stretched thin. Fuel so scarce that some destroyers train with half loads. Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki, fierce-eyed and intense, stands with his hands behind his back. He has the posture of a man still imagining decisive battle, still imagining fleet actions, even as the war is being decided by submarines and starvation. A convoy officer begins, voice flat. Convoy I-76 suffered attacks in the East China Sea. 2 ships sunk, 1 damaged. Escort reports indicate the submarines fired from ideal angles and withdrew before counterattack could be effective. Ugaki does not interrupt. He lets the officer continue until the pattern becomes clear. A story told in different dates, but the same outcome. Then Ugaki speaks. Were they sighted by aircraft before contact? No, sir. Coast Watcher reports. None. Then how? Ugaki asks. Were they already there? The convoy officer hesitates. His eyes flick to the communications section chief, then back to Ugaki. Sir, the convoy departure time and route were transmitted in accordance with procedure. Ugaki's mouth tightens. In accordance with procedure. He steps closer to the table and points to the route. There are places the convoy must pass, he says. Narrow waters. The enemy knows this, but our losses are not explained only by geography. They are explained by timing. They are explained by the enemy arriving before we arrive. A senior captain, older, shoulders stooped, speaks carefully. Sir, there is growing belief that the enemy is obtaining our sailing schedules through intercepted radio traffic, possibly through direction finding and analysis, even when the content is encrypted. Ugaki's eyes flash. Possibly. He turns to the communications chief. Is it possible, or is it true? The chief does not want to answer. But the war has stripped away the luxury of polite vagueness. Sir, he says, we must assume the enemy is reading something, either the codes, or the routine plain language, or the pattern of our transmissions. Our radio discipline has been insufficient. Ugaki exhales, a sharp breath through his nose. Insufficient, he repeats. That is a gentle word for it. He looks around the room at the men who have built their careers on procedure and staff work. Gentlemen, he says, if American submarines know our schedules, then we are feeding them. The sentence draws a line. Several officers nod without thinking, as if relieved that someone has finally said it plainly. A younger officer, bold or foolish, asks, then why do we still transmit? Ugaki's gaze snaps to him. Because we are an organization, he says. Not a single brain, because one office demands confirmation, another office demands coordination, another office fears responsibility if it acts without orders, and because merchant captains believe silence will bring punishment faster than torpedoes. He turns back to the chart, but now, he says, punishment comes from the sea. The meeting breaks into action. Orders are drafted, new restrictions, new compartments of information, shorter message formats, penalties. Again, the paper shield. Outside the naval district, in the streets of Kure, workers pedal bicycles past posters urging sacrifice. The people do not see the charts. They only feel the hunger, a shortage of rice, a shortage of fuel, a shortage of hope. The submarine war is not a battle they can watch, but it is a battle they feel in their stomachs. In the inland sea, convoys assemble with fewer ships. The captains are tense. Some refuse to turn on their radios unless absolutely necessary. Others cannot resist, sending small routine reports because habit has deeper roots than fear. At sea, off the Nansei-Shoto chain, a convoy moves south under overcast skies. The escort commander, a destroyer captain, keeps his sonar teams working until their ears ring. He orders zigzags, then more zigzags. He keeps his men awake with bitter tea and harsh words. He believes his enemy is somewhere near. Then, just after midnight, a torpedo hits a freighter in the middle of the column. The explosion is a muffled thunder under the water, followed by the awful tearing of steel. The ship shudders. Lights flicker, then die. Men scream. Lifeboats swing out. Oil spills into the black water. The destroyer captain spins his ship, orders depth charges. The sea erupts in white columns of foam. The sound of the charges rolls through the hull like a fist. For a few minutes, the escort captain feels the illusion of control. Then he realizes the submarine has already slipped away, as if it never existed. Later, in the radio room, the operator writes out the casualty report with shaking hands. He hesitates before sending it. Every part of him knows the enemy may be listening. He sends it anyway. In Tokyo, the next day, a staff officer places the report on an admiral's desk. The admiral reads it, then reaches for another folder, one that contains earlier convoy schedules. He lays them side by side. The departure times, the routes, the expected arrival, the sinkings. The alignment is too clean, the admiral murmurs. Not to anyone in particular, but to the paper itself. They know before we sail. A junior officer, standing nearby, hears him and feels his skin prickle. Because the statement is not metaphor, it is operational reality. If the enemy knows before you sail, then the enemy can place his submarines like traps, each one set in water where you must step. In another office, a different admiral puts it more sharply. We have lost the initiative at sea, he said. Not only because of enemy strength, but because of enemy knowledge. We are transparent. Transparent, the word sits in the air, bitter and humiliating. And as the year tilts toward winter, Japanese admirals are no longer debating whether radio insecurity exists. They are debating what to do when they can no longer trust their own airwaves at all. In a secure room behind heavy doors, senior officers gather with faces drawn tight. A charcoal brazier glows faintly in the corner, but it cannot chase away the chill. On the table are convoy summaries from the last 6 months, each one a ledger of disappearance. The tonnage lost is not just numbers. It is fuel that never reached destroyers, ammunition that never reached garrisons, rice that never reached kitchens, steel that never reached factories. Admiral Toyoda sits at the head, shoulders squared, eyes heavy with the responsibility of a fleet that is becoming a memory. Beside him are communications chiefs, convoy planners, intelligence officers. Men who once believed they could control the Pacific with doctrine and courage now argue about message formats and radio silence. A captain from the convoy section begins. Voice controlled but strained. Despite increased escort allocations and revised routing, losses continue at critical levels. Several convoys were attacked at the earliest possible interception points after departure. In multiple instances, the enemy appears to have positioned submarines before we issued final sailing orders to outlying stations. Before we issued final sailing orders, the sentence sounds impossible, and yet it is written in an official summary. Toyoda looks at the intelligence officer. Explain. The intelligence officer stands. He is thin, face pale from nights spent staring at charts and trying to make horror fit into logic. Sir, he says, The enemy likely derives convoy intentions from a combination of factors: routine traffic patterns, direction finding, and intercepted schedules transmitted by port authorities and merchant organizations. Even with encryption, the volume and timing of traffic may reveal departures. Additionally, it is possible that some of our ciphers have been compromised, though we cannot confirm the mechanism. Toyota does not react at first. He reads a line in the report again. Then again. The room is so quiet, you can hear the clock tick and the faint rasp of someone's sleeve. Toyota speaks slowly. "Gentlemen," he says, "we have reached the point where our convoys are being met, not found. There is a difference. Found implies search. Met implies appointment." Several men lower their eyes. It is the most damning way to describe what has been happening since 1943 and especially through 1944. A communications chief, older, voice rough, answers honestly, "Sir, we have failed to secure the ether. Even when we change codes, our procedure remains predictable. There are too many transmitters, too many acknowledgements, too many exceptions made in the name of speed." Toyota's gaze turns hard. "Speed," he says, as if tasting the word. "We have paid for speed with ships." The communications chief bows his head slightly. "Yes, sir." In the back of the room, a junior officer brings forward a folder containing complaints from shipping companies. They beg for relaxed restrictions. They say they cannot operate without routine transmissions. They say silence creates confusion, delay, and accidents. Toyota looks at the folder and then at the men around him. "Confusion," he says, "is preferable to certainty. At least confusion does not guide torpedoes." A senior admiral from the Home Waters Defense Section speaks, voice low. "Sir, convoy commanders report morale problems. Crews fear the radio. They believe every transmission calls in submarines. Some operators hesitate even to report distress." Toyota nods once. "They are not wrong." He turns to the convoy captain. "In your professional judgment," he asks, "do the Americans often know our shipping schedules in advance?" The room holds its breath. This is the question that has haunted countless meetings. Saying it plainly is like admitting the walls are made of paper. The convoy captain swallows. "Yes, sir." He says, "Often." The word "often" is carefully chosen. It avoids absolute certainty while still admitting operational truth. It is enough. Toyota closes his eyes for a brief moment, then opens them again. "Then we will treat our schedules as poisoned. We will reduce knowledge to the smallest possible circle. We will transmit only when life depends on it, and we will assume the enemy is listening, even when we speak in cipher." A staff officer tries to offer hope, his voice too quick. "If we enforce this strictly, sir, perhaps losses will decrease." Toyota looks at him and the hope falters under that gaze. "Perhaps," he says, "but enforcement cannot restore what is already gone." The meeting continues with details. Courier lines where possible, staggered departures, deception sailings, false signals, dummy convoys. They talk about creating noise in the ether to drown out meaning. They talk about spreading rumors through channels they suspect are compromised, hoping the enemy will chase phantoms. It is the mindset of men who know they are behind and are trying to claw back uncertainty. But outside the General Staff building, on the cold streets of Tokyo, the war has already moved past these measures. The empire is shrinking. The American submarine fleet is large, experienced, and patient, and the intelligence system guiding it has matured into something ruthless. In the weeks that follow, convoys sail with tighter radio discipline. Some operators keep their hands off the key until their knuckles ache. Some ships move without confirming. Some ports delay departures rather than risk a broadcast. And still, in certain straits, submarines appear. Because even reduced information can be enough when the geography is fixed and the enemy has learned your rhythm. In a final late-night meeting, after another report of tankers lost, Toyota speaks to a small group of his closest staff. The brazier has burned down to embers. The room smells of ash. He does not shout. He does not curse. He simply states the conclusion like a physician announcing a fatal diagnosis. "We have been fighting an enemy who reads the sea," he says, "but also an enemy who reads us. Our radio has become a weapon turned inward." No one argues. Outside, the wind moves through bare branches. Somewhere beyond the dark horizon, an American submarine runs silent. Captain leaning over a chart with a pencil line drawn to a point where a convoy must pass. On paper, it looks inevitable. In water, it becomes death.